Have two prominent members of the Denver Nuggets core four potentially played their last game in a Nuggets uniform? Like their home mates, the Colorado Avalanche, could Denver look to ship off a key member of their franchise in order to expand and build depth? And do they even have the roster for the flexibility to do so? All things to come on today's rundown, where we welcome in our Denver Sports Nuggets analyst to the stars, Jake Shapiro, fresh off a flight from Oklahoma City, where unfortunately the Denver Nuggets let a second straight year of Game 7 slip away. But this one felt a little bit different. Maybe not less painful, but different than last year. Was that fair?
Yeah, because the expectation going into this series, Richie, for me, was that the Nuggets were going to lose it. I thought the Nuggets were going to lose in 5 to the Thunder, especially coming off the Clippers series, given the coaching firings, all of those different aspects. Whereas last year, Minnesota, you had beat them the year before in the playoffs. You're kind of expecting that the Denver Nuggets could do the same thing to the Timberwolves. Granted, that Timberwolves team was a lot healthier in the second time they matched up in the playoffs. The Nuggets were the best versions of themselves. They literally won more games in 2024 than they did in 2023. People just don't even talk about that. So you were kind of expecting the Nuggets to just mercy their way through the Wolves. Then they lose the first 2 home games. They come back and they win the first 2 road games. Yep. And then you have that pivotal Game 5, which is the best game Nikola Jokic has ever played in his NBA career, in my estimation. You throw away Game 6 on the road where you get killed, and then Game 7, you blow the biggest lead in the Game 7 in NBA history. So that stung, but you still had the championship hangover. Whereas this year, I think it almost hurts more in a way because the path opened up in the NBA, but the actual matchup of who you were going against in the second round was tougher. And the matchup of who you were going up against in the first round, by the way, was tougher. The Nuggets had never beat a 50-win playoff team, 50-win team in the playoffs. They did that and then took another one to 7.
Yeah, the path most certainly was there when you see the Houston Rockets go down in the first round to Golden State, who then gets eliminated by Minnesota, who, yes, has been your bugaboo if you're the Denver Nuggets, the team that just kind of seems to own you mentally and physically, frankly, given how last year's postseason ended. And you get through the Clippers in 7, a series that maybe shouldn't have gone that long because the Clippers had the upper hand. And if they don't, if an Aaron Gordon tip-in dunk doesn't change the momentum of that series, we may not even be talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then you get to that series against a 68-win dominant NBA team with the presumptive MVP in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and you still find yourself with 8-point leads in the fourth quarter of games 4 and 5, and you let it slip away, totally erasing that narrative after stealing Game 1 early in the series and going up 2-1 with the championship medal and the pedigree.
I wrote it after Game 3, Richie. I called them the Clutchets. I'm like, they're not going to lose in the clutch this playoffs, and then they proceeded to lose in the clutch the next 2 games. What the heck do I know? But to me, Richie, it's no surprise the Nuggets lost in Game 4 and Game 5, and they lost the way they did. And it's really frustrating because you look at the ESPN win probability, it's at 90%, right? There's a really good chance that the Nuggets should have won those games. But they lost those games because of the lack of depth caught up to them. And the waves the Thunder could bring at the Nuggets caught up to them. So it's actually no surprise. While, yeah, the Nuggets did blow that game, to me, they were never really in the driver's seat in terms of how that series felt or how those individual games felt.
It's also, to me, in watching it, it's not necessarily just that they can go 9+ deep off of their bench. It's that the 8th, 9th, and maybe even 10th man off the bench in their extended rotation, it doesn't force them when they bring those players in to play any differently than they play most of the time with their starting 5. They're all long. They can all defend. They can all hit from the perimeter. So it's not just the wave after wave. It's that you don't get any kind of break or stylistic change in how they play if you're the Nuggets having to go against them.
Well, and having that depth like you're talking about also that allows them to just go really hard at you because you're not worried about foul trouble. You're not worried about running out of energy because someone else will replace you.
SGA having 4 fouls in the first half of a playoff game is not a big deal because they can shift and pivot other places.
Or Lou Dort hacking you all game or Alex Caruso hacking you all game doesn't matter because the other one will just come in and play in that spot. So
what did you make of that discourse, by the way, with specifically Alex Caruso kind of getting the Rui Hachimura treatment as the Jokic stopper, you know, and playing that style of defense? I looked at it as, I think you already get, because of the physical disparity between the two, when a guard defends against a big man, there's already, it feels like, more physicality allowed for the smaller person to compensate for the mismatch. But it felt like that was taken kind of to the nth degree here, not to take away from Caruso's defensive ability.
It was a joke the way the NBA officiated this series, specifically with the big man and the small man. In NBA history, course of NBA history, bigs dominated this league. Big, 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 big. And then all of a sudden something happened with Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan, where it became a guard-focused league. The thing that really changed, though, between Shaquille O'Neal and Nikola Jokic, because I heard so many times in the last 48 hours, a great big like Shaquille O'Neal would have just put him in the rim. Zone defense wasn't allowed.
Yes, spacing.
Zone defense specifically. You could literally not play zone defense according to the NBA rules at the time that Shaq was in the league. So it would have never happened where Jokic was guarded the way he was to Shaq. Jokic was not allowed to just back down Alex Caruso because they had not one, but two other Thunder players waiting for him in the paint.
Sure.
The laws of the game have changed since guys like Shaq, and it favors guards. So the way Nikola Jokic has taken over the league and become a big man that has won multiple MVPs, Richie, Giannis won an MVP, Joel Embiid won an MVP here, right, as well. But you have to go back. It's Shaq, Hakeem Olajuwon, and then it's like all the way back to like Moses Malone or the last centers to win a league. This is a guard league, and Nikola Jokic took it over. So the way the league is officiated, it favors guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander over Nikola Jokic. I thought Jokic really did a good job in trying to get to the line. He had 11 free throws early on in that game 7, and then he didn't have another. What was that? He was getting fouled the whole game. Yeah. And I hate to tell you that, the Denver people are complaining about the officiating, Star Lewis, blah, blah, blah. It didn't change game 7, and it didn't change game 2. But it did change the course of this series. And I think if this whistle was a little more fair and these teams could have played the same way physically, I think the Nuggets win this series. The thing is, the Thunder have the roster in place to let themselves play more physically, right? Because of those waves they can bring in. They are not punished when all of a sudden a guy is in foul trouble.
You, Jake, were very astute in pointing out over the course of this series that Nikola Jokic, by and large, had some of his worst postseason performances of his career in this playoffs. I think it was twice against the Thunder and once against the Clippers. He had 3 of his worst 4 or 5 games of his postseason career. And yet we still find a situation where he, through the first 2 rounds, the semifinal round of the playoffs, is first in points, rebounds, assists, steals, stocks, double-doubles, triple-doubles, and field goals. Where do you come down overall on Nikola Jokic's postseason performance now that the team has been eliminated in the semifinals again?
Jokic was really good, but not great. Like really, really good, but just he didn't get to that greatness level that is needed with the pieces around him because the Nuggets are so shallow. So it's not Nikola Jokic's fault. In fact, I'd probably give him a B+ for this playoff run. The problem is if the Nuggets were going to win a title, he needed to be at that A+ level, a guy who was literally getting a 35-point triple-double in every game. And that's a lot to ask of a guy playing against literally the first and second best defenses in the league. And he still was getting, I think, 28, 14, and 6, but he didn't have a single double-figure assist game in the Thunder series. And I think that tells you what you need to know because the pieces around him were not able to take advantage of the fact that they literally weren't being guarded. And some of it is explainable. By the end of the series, your starting forwards had 6 healthy limbs. Like, Jamal Murray this just wasn't the series for him. And I thought Jamal Murray was actually pretty decent in the series, but you have waves of perimeter defenders that are just up in Jamal Murray's grill.
And he seems to struggle with that. We saw it with Minnesota, with Jaden McDaniels.
Same exact problem they ran into last year. Yeah. And which is what's frustrating is a lot of the things we saw last year, the Nuggets had the exact same thing doom them this year, but Christian Braun, the offense was being funneled to him every single time that the starting 5 was out there in total. Christian Braun took 9 threes in game 7. That's just not an efficient offensive strategy, but that's what the Thunder baited the Nuggets into doing. And it took 7 games, Richie, for the Thunder to finally get back to what made them great as a team. They're really good when they can run 2 bigs. They're really good when Chet or Isaiah is out there by themselves. They're fantastic when they go small. And they did that all throughout the regular season, but they were so scared of Jokic that they didn't do it at any point in the series till for a minute in game 6. And then they just broke it out in game 7 and did it. And the fact that the Thunder could go so many different ways and styles about playing basketball, to me, that's why they're a 68-win team, a great team that's the favorites to win. The Nuggets had one way of winning, and it almost won them this series, which is incredible because of the lack of depth. So I don't blame Jokic. I don't blame Porter. I don't blame Murray. I don't blame Gordon in this series. And I don't blame Brown, because the Nuggets were designed to be beat the way that they got beat. And ultimately, people on their bench, whether it be Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Russell Westbrook, weren't up to the task. And I don't know if that's because they didn't get enough playing time during the season. Julian and Peyton, obviously, Russ has gotten plenty of playing time, where they haven't developed enough. Julian's injury obviously had an effect. Peyton got injured right before that had a little bit of effect on his confidence and stuff. There's all sorts of stuff and machinations that go into these teams that do not get looked at. And it's all being boiled down to now 48 hours after the Nuggets have lost the Thunder of, oh, Jokic didn't put Caruso in the rim. That's simply not how this basketball game works.
No, and I think he has kind of warped perception as far from an NBA standpoint, or even here locally from a Nuggets standpoint, in the sense that I truly believe he has normalized greatness in the NBA to a degree that just we have become so accustomed to it and used to it that we're looking at a player who through the first 2 rounds of the NBA playoffs was the leader in 8 major statistical categories, and we're like, it wasn't enough. Well, it feels weird when you say it like without the names involved.
And look at the individual plays. Go back to game 4 against the Clippers that everyone will remember for the Aaron Gordon tip dunk. What happened right before that? Jokic hit one of the sickest shots I've ever seen in my life.
The turnaround 3-pointer?
No, the 3 spins against Zubac on the post, on the block to tie the game.
Oh, you're right.
You don't even remember
You're right.
Right. He does some of the wildest stuff I've ever seen on a basketball court. People are out here, oh, he doesn't have highlights.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Did you see that pass to Christian Braun?
Because he can't jump.
Like, I don't get it. So I have a hard time blaming Jokic. You know, he's extension eligible this summer for 3 years, $212 million. That contract actually doesn't kick in for like 3 more years. Like, it's really kind of hard to explain this to like just a general audience.
As is the NBA. Yeah.
But all you need to know is Nikola Jokic, who is not under threat of being free agent or leaving anytime soon, can sign to be with the Nuggets even further, like to 2030, basically, at $250 million. And the Nuggets should do it. The Nuggets will do it. And Nikola Jokic, I'm pretty certain, is going to sign that contract.
Okay, because that was going to be something else I wanted to touch on, is that we as a Nuggets fan base and maybe even a Nuggets media core, are we potentially taking for granted the idea that Jokic is just happy to play here and be here regardless of the circumstance, even if they've been, crashed and burned from a core 4 or a postseason contention perspective? Or is there a chance, as we're watching what's potentially going on in Milwaukee, where there seems to be some rumblings out there, that something like that could happen here with Denver and Nikola?
Well, how do we arrive in Milwaukee where they're at right now, Rich? You think about it, right?
Yeah.
The situation they're at, Giannis wins back-to-back MVPs.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, he doesn't win MVP, might be the best player in the league, wins the title.
Mm-hmm.
The next year, they have a devastating postseason injury, fall earlier in the postseason than anyone expects. The team panics. The team makes a trade for Damian Lillard. And they trade Drew Holiday, who they had already traded a lot of assets to get
from New Orleans
for Damian Lillard. What happens then? Damian Lillard doesn't work out the way in a pick and roll with Giannis. They panic again. They trade for Kyle Kuzma. And now all of a sudden, the Milwaukee Bucks have no assets. They have a roster that is just stuck in the middle. They've got a player who's hurt, and they're so shallow because of the lack of assets and because they went all in on these star players that with the injury to Damian Lillard, there's no other option but to maybe do the nuclear thing and trade Giannis. So what does that equate to with the Nuggets? Okay. Maybe they use their last remaining option with their picks and their pick protections to trade Porter for a different person. Okay, maybe they do the same thing with Murray. Now you have a star, a name, a big guy. I don't know who it is. Just name your flavor of the day in the NBA, right? Maybe it's Kyrie. I don't know. Well, Kyrie might not be healthy. Then all of a sudden, the Nuggets have literally no assets. They have almost no assets right now. Then it's Jokic at year 30. He's 33 years old. And the Nuggets don't have a pathway to improve. At least right now, we know the Nuggets are good. We don't even know that the Bucks aren't good. Yeah. The Nuggets right now still are good. So there's no reason in my mind to take the risk of losing Jokic in the last part of his prime at the thought of maybe we can get a little bit better by shrinking the margin even more. Jokic told you what he wants. He wants a deeper bench. He wants a longer rotation.
The deeper teams are the ones that are winning.
Right. He doesn't want a bigger star next to him. He wants a deeper bench. So to me, it makes no sense in the world to go get Kevin Durant or whatever it might be. So what the Nuggets need to do this offseason to appease Jokic and not take for granted that he is so hands-off and he's so mellow and he's not requesting trades is he put the pressure on the organization by saying, go get me a deeper bench. He did. He's not telling you to go get him Kevin Durant. He's telling you to, hey, that Kayson Wallace guy, go find me one of those. That's a lot easier to do, and it's something the Nuggets actually have pathways to go do. And that, to me, is the right approach because literally, if they had Justin Holiday where Justin Holiday was last year in the Minnesota series, if they had Jeff Green where Jeff Green was 3 years ago against the Lakers and the Suns, those two pieces alone, Richie, I think win the Nuggets this series and perhaps wins them the title this year.
So how do they do that realistically, Jake? How do they, the Nuggets, attempt to get Jokic a deeper bench? And do you think it involves potentially slicing off a member of the core four, whether it's Michael Porter Jr., who's under contract through, I believe, 26-27 season, or somehow, even though it's going to be a lot harder given the extension he just signed, and Jamal Murray is about to make $50+ million a year and make your offsetting salaries a little bit more difficult. How do they get to that point?
Well, to me, it's going to be very hard to break up one of the four guys and end up with a deeper team or a better asset or something like that, because Nikola Jokic obviously isn't being traded. So let's take that one off. Aaron Gordon has a 25% trade kicker, and I don't understand how you'd want to trade him after what we just saw in the playoffs from him and what he just gave to your franchise.
No, Nikola Jokic is like untouchable for me, but if there's a tier right below untouchable for what he means to the locker room and like the heartbeat, pulse, soul of the team, as Adelman and others have.
Well, Christian Braun says to me after the game 7 goes, Aaron Gordon is the Denver Nuggets.
He is
like,
the Denver
that's
Nuggets.
exactly
He's
what
Mr. Nugget.
Right. Which is a great way to put it. Michael Porter Jr. has negative trade value. He just does. And I actually like Mike. And the thing is about Mike is you're not getting a 6'10" shooter back that's an A+ shooter for anything you trade away from Mike. So to me, the team that shot 100 fewer threes than any other team in the league this year shouldn't be trading the one guy who can shoot threes. It's a non-starter for me. And oh, by the way, he's your second best rebounder. And you couldn't rebound the ball defensively this year. That was one of their biggest issues, is they had bad defensive rebounding. And Mike was an important part of when they were good at that. Jamal Murray, you just signed to a massive extension. There's no one that's as good as Jamal that you're getting back for Jamal. So to me, it makes very little sense to trade Jamal and say, okay, we're getting another point guard back who's not an elite ball handler, who's not an elite shot creator, and we're getting a 3-and-D player. Well, who's running your offense? It's nice that you might have a guy like Ayo Dosunmu now, but is Josh Giddey going to run your offense? Like, right. It doesn't really make much sense. So to me, the pathway for the Nuggets, the easiest pathway is you just hope Dario Saric does not opt into his player option, which I can probably report now that he's going to, because it's $5.5 million. Well, the only way he wouldn't is Real Madrid really wants him.
Yeah, it gets a killer offer overseas.
Yeah, and the thing is, his perfect world is that he accepts the money here, then gets cut, then gets to go to Europe. The problem is the Nuggets don't actually have the assets needed to trade him to another team where he would get cut, and then he could go to Europe. So by the Nuggets having very few assets, it actually works into Dario maybe not accepting that money. Russell Westbrook, I don't want on this team anymore. That's going to be a whole topic of conversation in the Mile High Hoops podcast today.
Okay.
But that leaves you with needing a backup ball handler, which what you needed last year. It leaves you needing probably another 3-and-D guy or 2 3-and-D guys coming off your bench. And then to me, I'm telling Aaron Gordon at the start of the year, Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray at the start of the year, you're playing no more than 65 games. If you play 65 games, that's great, but you're playing no more than 65 games because I need Julian Strother and Peyton Watson to end up with like 26 minutes a night by the end of the season. And not obviously in the games that those guys are healthy, but, just build up a ton of minutes and get your confidence in a spot, because look what playing Christian Braun did for Christian Braun. He was literally the 4th most improved player in the league this year. I'm not saying that, Julian or Peyton are as talented as Christian. I'm not sure. But we won't know until you actually play them.
But those are the pieces that you have, and you hope that maybe Deron Holmes coming off of an injury can give you some kind of spot help during the regular season and develop into a playoff contributor.
So we're talking about internal development. We're talking about minimum contracts, guys that are veterans, guys that are looking to title hunt. Maybe, a guy like Nick Batum, you saw how big of a difference maker he was for the Clippers. It's slim pickings for the Nuggets. They're in a really tough spot, but you just have to hope there's players like DeAndre Jordan who can kind of back channel through the league and say, hey, this is a really good situation. If you want to win a ring, this might be your best chance. Trust me, I did it.
You like the NBA trade machine, Jake?
I'm in it all the time.
You like messing around with that?
Oh, I'm in it all
well,
the
let me
time.
give you a hypothetical scenario that was thrown out there by Brett Siegel that's gone kind of around the interwebs on social media. What would you say to a 3-team trade between the Denver Nuggets, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Chicago Bulls? Here's how it shakes
The Nuggets
out.
are getting Wemby?
I wish.
Oh, okay.
I wish.
Well,
they don't have, listen.
Yeah, okay.
Denver would receive from the Bulls Kobe White and Kevin Huerter. From the Spurs, they would receive Harrison Barnes. So it's a 3-player return in a haul for them. And Kobe White, Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes. San Antonio receives Michael Porter Jr. Chicago would receive Keldon Johnson, Russell Westbrook, Zeke Naji, pick 38 from the Spurs, Denver's 2031 first, and a second-round pick in 2028 from San Antonio. The trade machine approved that trade. Does Jake Shapiro approve that trade with the return that would be coming back?
So Spurs are trading the 38th pick in the draft, Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson, and they're getting Michael Porter Jr. back?
Yes.
They're not saying yes to that.
I didn't think so.
Okay,
either.
So from the Nuggets perspective, what's interesting here is I can report and I can tell you that the Nuggets, before they signed Jamal Murray to that max extension, they actually offered the Bulls and them went back and forth on a trade. That would have netted the Nuggets, Alex Caruso, and Colby White.
That would have been nice. What were they giving up?
Jamal. And I don't know the exact specifics because it was in discussion, but that was what was being discussed. So I don't know who said no. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the exact specifics were, but that was the framework. Mm-hmm. Colby White's a really good player. I'm a big fan of Colby White. I don't know about the chemistry aspect because you have to develop that with Nikola Jokic over time. Jamal Murray has done that. So I think any trade of Jamal is very risky because just in 2023, the best thing any team in the NBA did was Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic's 2-man game. Yep. And to me, I'm doing whatever I can do to support that 2-man game. So to me, it's getting shooting and it's getting defense so that they don't have to put as much mileage on their bodies on the defensive side, and they can open up the floor on the offensive side. And to me, that's my number one objective. It's not trading Jamal, even though that trade actually is pretty decent for the Denver Nuggets, all things considered. I'm a huge Ayo Dosunmu fan, so I would actually look at that from the Bulls. He's completely undervalued, really good player, can do a lot of different things, combo guard, and a 3-and-D kind of player. But the guy that's in that trade that I don't love is Harrison Barnes. I think he's just at a point in his NBA career, and he gets paid a lot of money. So you're replacing a bad contract with Porter with another bad contract in Barnes, but the thing you're getting back is you're getting 2 other players.
Porter and White, yeah.
And that's the dangerous thing the Nuggets are doing right now is like any of these trades is you might be getting a more negative value guy back for one of the players on your top end to increase your depth and rotation. And to me, when you go plus 34 in a series as a starting 5 in 192 minutes against a team that won 68 games. That's what the Nuggets starting 5 was. Plus 34 in this series. And Russell Westbrook is a minus 34 just in game 7. I think the answer is pretty clear of what the problem is and what the Nuggets need to do to solve it.
Yep. Well, the Nuggets are in a position where their core 4 takes up 82% of their total payroll. And that, I think, is going to make it difficult, even though they're heading into a 4th straight luxury tax season and they're flirting between that first and second apron with their decision-making on Christian Braun, who I believe is a free agent after this next upcoming season.
He'd be a restricted free agent after next year.
After next year, okay? And it came from ESPN's, or not ESPN, but NBA front office insider Bobby Marks, put out there pretty confidently that he feels that Christian Braun's number is going to be somewhere around $30 million a year. He said, quote, Christian Braun will get paid. He's a terrific player, and he fits what you're trying to do. I think the number's at least $30 million per year. Now, I think without Christian Braun, the Nuggets sit about $26 or $27 million, $27 million under that second apron threshold, which means that if Christian's going to make 30, you're going into that second apron to try to re-sign him. What do you think, especially if we're not we in the Nuggets are not going to split up our core four, as you've said, is difficult to do and maybe not the wisest thing to do given the way things have shaken out. How is that going to impact the immediate and long-term future with Christian Braun here in the Nuggets?
So that contract would kick in 2026, 2027 on the payroll that year for the Nuggets. It's Nikola Jokic at 59, Jamal Murray at 50, Michael Porter Jr. with a player option for 40.1, Aaron Gordon. That's when his contract jumps up to $32 million. So Christian Braun would become the fifth highest paid Nugget if Porter accepts the money, but there's a chance that it's the fourth highest paid Nugget, and I'm sure Porter's going to accept that money. But basically, you're going to be in cap hell for 2026, 2027. But then moving forward, Braun replaces that salary that Porter would have, or to a lesser extent, but that salary slot. I'm letting this thing play out if 30 million is truly the number on Christian Braun. I'm going to restricted free agency. I'm seeing what other teams can give him because there's almost no one with salary cap money in the NBA, free cap money, that can offer Christian Braun a lot of money. And if they do, you're going to offer Christian Braun a near max deal when, next summer there's some pretty big name guys. LeBron James might be a free agent. Like, I'm not saying LeBron's going anywhere, but like LeBron quality players, like you're going to, Christian Braun's not a star. There's star players, So Christian Braun's a really good role player.
He's on his way up.
Yeah, he's a really good role player. I have a lot of hope in Christian Braun, but this is, to me, the biggest decision of the Nuggets offseason is what do they do with Christian Braun? And if they decide to extend him, how much for? I went back and I looked at how much guys got paid that were similar amount of minutes playing time in the last draft class, so that were extension eligible on the same exact type of deal last summer. We're talking about Josh Giddey, who didn't get that extension. We're talking about guys on the Rockets who, Alpin Şengün, who is a star, who's been an all-star. Mm-hmm. That's $35 million a year. We're talking about Herb Jones on the Pelicans, who got $15 million a year, or I think it's like 12 and a half. So to me, it's pretty clear that the Denver Nuggets have a player a lot closer to Herb Jones than they do Alpin Şengün in this situation. And to me, I'd have a hard time paying Christian Braun more than $23 million a year. So I would take it to the open market. I would see what they offer him back. And that gets into a bad territory. And the Nuggets have shown over time that they don't want to get into that territory. Yeah. That's why they extend Porter early. That's why they extend Murray early. Not only because they don't want to lose them, but because they don't want them in that kind of bad mental space that comes with being in a contract year. It brings all sorts of just weird ramifications. So I think it's time that the Nuggets have to make some really hard decisions. And to me, one of them is you might want to have to get uncomfortable with Christian Braun. Part of drafting and developing is it's great. You've got these players that are on cost-controlled contracts that are cheap. There's no point to it if you're going to go turn around and give him $30 million. You have him cost-controlled. He's a restricted free agent. Go see what it's worth.
Yeah, well, listen, Calvin Booth primarily rolled the dice a lot on a handful of moves, from letting KCP walk to bringing in a Dario Saric and Russell Westbrook. And a lot of those...
by the way, Payton Watson is extension eligible too. Same draft class, first-round pick as well. The amount of money Calvin Booth was going to give Payton Watson was eye-watering. Just going to put that out there.
Yeah. Well, he clearly came up snake eyes on a lot of dice rolls. And now that he's no longer here, the Nuggets may have to keep rolling the dice and just hope that, the Jake Shapiro plan rolls out. They get some boxcars and Christian Braun comes in way south of that $30 million a year. And you just have to wait and hope that it gets there. In closing, Jake, on the way out, we talked kind of at the beginning about the overall view of the Denver Nuggets. And now that they've been eliminated from the semifinal round for a second straight year, and we're another year into the prime years of Nikola Jokic with all of the roster inflexibilities and the lack of depth, and basically failing after pushing the chips into the center of the table and going all in.
Well, they pushed all the chips in and they were the most successful possible. They won a championship.
Yeah. I'm talking about this season. Yeah. Post-title run.
Well, post-title run, a lot of their moves have been bad, but it's also you have to understand how they got there, which is they had limited assets the entire time they've been making these moves. So it's limited some of their moves, but I'm not going to sit here and defend the Dario Saric signing. I'm not going to sit here and defend
Serbia.
Right. And the thing too, that Richie, we're not talking about today about the Thunder is the Nuggets made two just disaster trades in the draft. Just two disaster trades in the draft by moving up assets in order to get Payton Watson, who hasn't proven yet that he's a great NBA player. I have a lot of hope in him. I think there's a lot of potential there. We all see it. And then they also did the same thing a year later, doubled down in the picking of Julian Strother, Hunter Tyson, and Jalen Pickett. Do you remember who those two trades were with?
I don't.
Same team. The Oklahoma City Thunder.
Wow.
Who now has your 2027 and 2029 first round picks because of those trades.
Oh my gosh. That is just I didn't need that. I didn't need that gut punch there.
And you know, Sam Presti, who everyone's the draft pick hoarder, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's talking about how this Thunder team is set up for the second apron world. Sam Presti was on the board making the decisions about he was part of the NBA's negotiating team in the CBA. The Thunder were prepared for all of this. The Thunder operated correctly moving into this era. The Nuggets signed all these contracts under an old era in the old CBA, and now they're paying the price for it, and that's why they're so boxed in.
When you're looking at the Nuggets, who are, you know, just a couple of years removed from winning their first title in franchise history, and again, as we kind of continue to have to frame we are in, you know, prime years with Nikola Jokic, who at this time has proven that he's one of, if not the best player in the world, depending on, you know, who fits your flavor at any given time of day. Given those parameters, a second semifinal bounce in consecutive years makes this Nuggets season a success or failure, factoring in the limitations that they had, but also the difficulty that it takes to win a championship and the window that they are in to try to make that happen. Success or failure for this Denver Nuggets team, Jake Shapiro?
I wrote a very in-depth column on Denver Sports late Sunday night, early Monday morning after the game, so please go read that. My conclusion was that the players succeeded with flying colors, and Josh Kroenke failed this team. Calvin Booth failed this team. Michael Malone failed this team. It had nothing to do with the players' performance on the floor. Given where they were at 7 weeks ago, to get to the point against one of the best teams we have seen in the NBA in a decade, in 7 games in the second round, I'm so impressed. I'm so proud of these guys. Like, it was so cool to see what they did. This playoff run to me was the second most impressive playoff run of the Nikola Jokic era, besides the championship. Mm-hmm. It was more impressive than the bubble, even in my mind, even the 3-1 comebacks and the whole craziness of the bubble. It was so telling about this core and how there's life left and how there's magic left with this group, and that Nikola Jokic can still do great things. But the parts of the roster we talked about, unacceptable. Calvin Booth's fault. The coaching decisions Michael Malone made and getting into an ego clash and a war between Malone and Booth and not being above that and not putting players first in his priorities and instead making it seem like he is the most important voice of every conversation. That's why he's no longer here. And Josh Kroenke allowing those things to occur while at the exact same time letting Calvin Booth become the GM, while 15 months later, the executive in the NBA becomes just as important as the executive in the NFL, the most important person in your organization, and you let the best executive ever had walk, and you replace him with a guy who made some of the most confounding moves. It's Josh, it's Calvin, it's Mike who failed. They get Fs. To me, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Christian Braun as a whole, that starting 5. I don't know if it's an A, but it's a success. It's a B+, it's an A-. I thought they were wonderful. They did what it took to win a championship this year. The pieces around them didn't.
I love it. I think we learned a lot about individual players on this roster. I think we learned a lot about the starting 5, really the core 4 kind of within that 5, and whether or not they are capable collectively of continuing to contend for a title, especially in a Western Conference that seems to be arming up around them at a pretty crazy rate, regardless of what goes
Cooper
on.
Flag.
Yeah, regardless of what goes on in the East. But I agree. If you want to split it between the executives and the failures, the executives, in my opinion, no doubt receive poor marks for the way that they have handled these handful of years since kind of that magical run to win their first title.
Well, and it started eroding right before when you let Tim walk out the door. Yeah. And the KCP move that Calvin made that everyone gives him credit for, that was already in the works with Tim right before that, in that trade deadline. And Bruce Brown, it's not like they just magically walked into that situation. So even Calvin's 2 best moves, some of it you have to credit Tim. You know, the one Calvin Booth move that's paid off in spades is the drafted Christian Braun. Yep. And the only thing everyone within the Nuggets agreed on is that Christian Braun rocks.
Think about the difference in the trajectory of the franchises. If a Godfather offer is presented here in Denver and Tim Connolly never walks out that door, the Minnesota Timberwolves certainly look different than they do.
They probably
right
never
now.
trade for Rudy.
Sure.
Because Rudy,
that was one of the first things he did.
And everyone thought it was insane because Rudy had no value at the time and he overpaid. He gave a lot of value for Rudy. And then he made the really gutsy decision to trade Cat, who I really like and, you know, is a great player. And obviously the Knicks are seeing the benefits of it. But, you know, that's worked out well for the Wolves as well. Richie, what I would tell you too is the one thing I would, and speaking of Godfather offers, and you mentioned Jamal Murray, the thing that Nuggets fans should look for if you want a star trade is, do you staple Christian Braun and his looming extension to Michael Porter Jr. and blow up the starting unit and rebuild around Murray, Gordon, and Jokic? That's the one thing that kind of makes sense if you were going to do it, because Christian Braun has oodles of value and you don't have to pay him next year. So a team that has a 1-year window of competition and then can figure it out on the back end, say a Los Angeles Lakers or something. I'm not saying that's where Christian Braun's going. I'm just telling you that there's teams that are in that situation. That's something I would look at as a potential opportunity for the Nuggets to make a big move. I wouldn't want it, but that is out there.
Well, we are going to have quite an off season of scrolling and refreshing and watching to see what happens. And it may end up that not a whole lot happens, because that's sometimes how it goes. But Jake, thank you so much for everything you've done over the course of this Nuggets season, traveling on the road, putting out great content at DenverSports.com, on all of our social channels on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to our page at DenverSports 1043 and follow along with everything Jake and Will Peterson and Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, and all of our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan crew are doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We'll catch you tomorrow.